Landon Dorsey didn't expect to catch a woman in his arms that morning literally. He was jogging up the subway stairs with a paper bag of muffins in one hand and his 6-year-old son's tiny hand in the other when a flash of heels, legs, and panic came tumbling down the steps. "Whoa," he shouted, dropping the bag and catching her just before she hit the ground. She was light, breathless, and dressed in a tailored navy suit that screamed money. "Oh my God," she gasped, clinging to his shoulders. "I almost fell," Landon finished, heart racing. "Yeah, I noticed." She blinked at him, wide-eyed. Her hair was sleek, her lipstick flawless, and her perfume smelled expensive in a way he couldn't name. But her face, there was something about her face. Like she wasn't used to being caught off guard. "Thanks," she said quickly, brushing herself off and standing up straight. I wasn't looking." "I figured," Landon said, adjusting the strap of his worn backpack. "You okay?" She glanced at her scraped palm, then at the little boy staring up at her with a muffin in his mouth. "I will be. Thanks to you." "You're welcome," Landon said, already turning away. "Come on, Wyatt. We're gonna be late." "Wait," the woman called after him, heels clicking as she followed. "You're just leaving?" He paused, raising an eyebrow. "You want me to stick around and ask for your insurance card?" She laughed, and it surprised her. "No, most people would have asked for something. A name. Number." Landon gave her a crooked grin. "Strangers don't usually fall into my arms before 8 a.m. I'm Landon. That's Wyatt." Wyatt waved, muffin crumbs on his cheek. "She felt like a superhero," he said proudly. The woman crouched to his level. "Well, your dad is definitely the superhero in this story. Are you a princess?" Wyatt asked seriously. She blinked. "Something like that." Landon chuckled. "All right, bud. We gotta go. Nice meeting you, Mississippi." "Fallon," she said, standing again. Fallon Whitmore. It meant nothing to him. He just nodded. "Take care, Fallon." And then he was gone, disappearing into the morning crowd with his son and a bag of squished muffins. Fallon stood there for a moment, watching him go. The name stuck in her head like a song. Landon Dorsey. She hadn't told him the rest. That she was CEO of Whitmore Holdings. That her driver was late. That she was on her way to close a $70 million acquisition before noon. That no one ever caught her when she fell until now. By 2 p.m., Fallon was in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking Manhattan, signing documents that would make headlines by morning. But her mind kept drifting to that man. The way he didn't flinch when she fell. The way his son smiled like the world was simple. "Ms. Whitmore," her assistant, Grace, said hesitantly. "You've been staring at the same page for 5 minutes." Fallon blinked.
"Sorry.
"Just tired." Grace hesitated. "There's something else. I looked into that man from this morning. Landon Dorsey." Fallon's eyes snapped up. "You what?" "You asked me to find him, remember?" Grace said carefully. "He's a single dad. Used to be a firefighter. His wife died 3 years ago. He's been working 2 jobs, handyman gigs and night security, to take care of his son." Fallon sat back, stunned. "He never said any of that." "No," Grace said.
He didn't."
Fallon stood abruptly. "I want to talk to him. Set something up." Grace's eyebrows lifted. "You sure?" "He caught me," Fallon said, grabbing her coat. "The least I can do is buy him dinner." Landon didn't recognize her right away when she walked into the community center where he was fixing a busted sink. She wore jeans, a leather jacket, and no makeup, but the way she carried herself hadn't changed. "You again," he said, drying his hands on a rag. "Didn't expect to see you in this part of town." Fallon smiled. "Didn't expect you to be fixing sinks." He shrugged. "They pay me in leftover lasagna and bus fare. What can I do for you, Fallon?" "I owe you dinner," she said. He chuckled. "You don't owe me anything." "Humor me," she said. "I want to say, Thank you. Properly. Landon studied her for a long moment. She didn't look like a woman who heard no very often. All right, he said finally. But I'm picking the place. That made her laugh.
Deal.
He took her to a tiny Italian spot with red checkered tablecloths and bread that came in baskets. She didn't complain once. She actually looked
Happy.
so, he said over lasagna. What do you really do, Fallon Whitmore? She sipped her wine. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. I'm the CEO of Whitmore Holdings. Landon stared at her. She waited. I don't know what that is, he said finally. Fallon blinked. You're serious? I work nights and raise my kid. I don't have time for Forbes. She grinned. It's a Fortune 500 company. Real estate, tech, energy projects. Landon let out a low whistle. And I took you to Carmine's. I like Carmine's, she said. And I liked that you didn't know. He leaned in slightly. Why? Because you didn't look at me like I was my bank account, she said softly. You looked at me like a person. Landon didn't say anything for a second. Then, quietly, you are a person. She looked at him, and something in her chest shifted. She wasn't used to this. The honesty, the quiet strength, the way he looked at her like she was real. I want to see you again, she said. He smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. 3 weeks later, she was coming over for dinner with Wyatt. She brought steak and a bag of toys. Landon grilled. Wyatt told her about school. They laughed over burnt potatoes and ended the night watching cartoons on the couch. It was simple, and beautiful, and terrifying. Because Fallon had never pictured herself here on a worn couch with a 6-year-old asleep on her lap and a man beside her who made her feel more seen than anyone in her entire world of power and deals and closed doors. You're quiet, Landon said, watching her. I'm thinking, she said. About. She looked at him. How fast this is moving.
He nodded.
I know, but it feels right. She swallowed. It does. He reached for her hand. I don't have much, Fallon. You have everything that matters, she whispered. He kissed her. Slow, certain, full of everything unspoken. And just like that, Fallon Whitmore, the woman who never felt was falling for a man who'd caught her without even trying. Fallon sat quietly at the corner of Landon's small kitchen table, watching Wyatt press dinosaur stickers onto a sheet of construction paper with single-minded focus. She sipped from a chipped mug, the peppermint tea steeping slowly as the scent of grilled cheese lingered in the air. The overhead light flickered once, and Landon reached up, tapping the fixture. I need to replace that tomorrow, he muttered. She glanced up. I can send someone. It'll take 10 minutes. No, he replied without looking at her. I've got it. Fallon studied his profile, the way his jaw tightened slightly. His quiet pride was something she was still learning how to navigate. He didn't like help, especially the kind that came wrapped in money. Do you ever let anyone do anything for you? She asked, keeping her tone light. He turned to face her. Only if it's not something I can do myself. She leaned back in her chair. That's a heavy way to live. He folded his arms over his chest. I've managed. Wyatt looked up. Dad made a bookshelf for my room last weekend. It has 3 shelves and a spot for my robot. Fallon smiled. Did he paint it too? Yeah. It's blue and it smells like peanut butter. Landon gave her a look. That's because he spilled a sandwich inside it before the paint dried. Wyatt giggled and went back to his stickers. Fallon tilted her mug in Landon's direction. You're a better father than most men I know. He didn't answer. Instead, he bent to pick up a crayon that had rolled off the table and handed it back to Wyatt. When he straightened, his eyes met Fallon's again. You're not like most women I've met, he said. Her smile faded slightly. Is that a compliment or a warning?
Both, he said.
You walk into rooms and people shift. You're used to being the most powerful person there. She set her mug down. I don't know what that has to do with us. It means I'm trying to figure out where I fit, he said simply. Fallon opened her mouth, then closed it again. No one had ever said something like that to her, not with such calm honesty. She stood and walked to the sink, rinsing her mug. Her reflection in the window stared back at her, less composed than she wanted to be. I don't need you to fit into anything, Landon, she said without turning around. I just need you to be you. He came to stand beside her, resting his hand lightly on the counter. And what happens when your world pulls you back into it? She finally met his eyes. Then I'll pull you in with me. His expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted, the silence between them no longer uncertain, but full of possibilities neither of them had dared name yet. Later that night, after Fallon had gone and Wyatt was finally asleep, Landon sat on the edge of a couch, staring at the folder she'd forgotten on the coffee table. Her initials were embossed in gold at the corner. He shouldn't have opened it, but he did. Inside were site plans, financial breakdowns, and a list of upcoming projects. One of them had his neighborhood listed as a potential redevelopment zone. He scanned the notes, heart sinking. Demolition, rezoning, luxury units. None of it sounded like something families like his could afford. He closed the folder and set it gently back where he found it. The next morning, Fallon was at her desk before sunrise. She barely glanced up as her assistant placed a latte on the table beside her. Your 9 o'clock was pushed to 10, Grace said. But the city rep called again. They're asking for a revised proposal on the East Side project. Fallon pulled the folder toward her. Tell them I'll send it today. Grace hesitated. The East Side's going to be a hard sell. Most of the tenants can't afford relocation. The city wants guarantees. Fallon nodded slowly. Then we'll give them guarantees. She barely heard Grace's response as her eyes fell on the street names in the proposal. Her breath caught. It was Landon's block. His building. His community center. Everything he cared about. She leaned back in her chair, fingers curling into fists. Grace. Cancel my next meeting. Are you sure? Very. An hour later, she was standing in the middle of Landon Street, dressed in jeans and boots, her coat thrown over her arm. She walked past the corner bodega, the playground with the faded jungle gym, the row of stoops shaded by fire escapes. People nodded at her, curious but polite. She kept walking until she reached the community center. Inside, Landon was repairing a broken door hinge, his tool belt slung low on his hips. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. You left something, he said, straightening. I know, she said quietly. I read it. He wiped his hands on an old towel. So, you know your company's planning to level this block. She nodded. He waited for her to say more. When she didn't, he turned back to the door. I didn't know until last night, she said. But I know now. That doesn't change what's coming. It could. He paused, then looked over his shoulder. You think you can stop a project that's already in review? I think I can rewrite it, she said. Reroute the demolition to the empty zone behind the train line. Preserve the housing. Add a grant for community-led renovations. You'd stay. So, would everyone else. He stared at her. Why would you do that? Because I care about what matters to you, she said. And because I'm not the woman who lets numbers erase people. Landon set down his drill. That'll make you a lot of enemies. I've had worse, she said. They stood there in the quiet hum of the old building. Dust floated through the sunlight. Outside, kids shouted as they chased each other down the sidewalk. I've never had anyone do something like this for me, he said at last. You caught me, she said softly. Now I'm catching you. He stepped forward, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You don't scare me, Fallon. She smiled. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. And in that moment, surrounded by peeling paint and the scent of sawdust, it didn't matter what titles she held or how much she was worth. She wasn't a CEO. She was a woman who had fallen and had chosen exactly where to land. The rain started as a whisper against the windows of Landon's apartment, then built into a steady drumming that turned the evening soft and quiet. Wyatt was with his godmother Landon's late wife's best friend off for a sleepover filled with popcorn and dinosaur movies. That left Landon alone in the apartment until Fallon knocked, soaked from the sudden downpour, a paper bag clutched in one arm and her hair curling around her shoulders. "I didn't realize how far it was until my driver bailed," she said, stepping in as Landon opened the door. "And I wasn't going to let a little weather stop me." He took the bag from her, eyebrows raised. "You walked." "Half ran," she said, peeling off her coat with a laugh. "The pizza might be a little damp." Landon set the bag on the counter and reached for a towel, handing it to her. "You could have called. I'd have come to get you." "I didn't want to wait," she said, pressing the towel to her hair. "Besides, I needed the walk." He watched her for a moment as she moved through his kitchen like she belonged there. "Rough day." She leaned against the counter, eyes tired. "Board vote. One of my VPs tried to push a proposal that would have gutted our housing initiative. I vetoed it, and now half the board thinks I've gone soft." "Because you chose people over profit?" She shrugged. "It's not a popular stance in my world." Landon pulled out 2 plates. "Then maybe you need a new world." Fallon smiled faintly. "That's the thing. I don't want a new one. I want to change the one I'm in." They ate in the living room, the pizza slightly soggy but still warm. Fallon curled up with her feet tucked under her, watching the rain blur the city beyond the window. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked suddenly. "Miss what?" "Being a firefighter. That kind of purpose. That kind of adrenaline." Landon leaned back, chewing slowly. "I miss the clarity. When a building's on fire, you don't waste time second-guessing. You go in. You save who you can. There's no politics."
No bordrom vitrails.
She tilted her head. "So why'd you stop?" He glanced down. "After my wife died, I couldn't go back. Every siren made Wyatt cry. He'd wake up screaming if he didn't know where I was. I had to choose." She didn't speak right away. When she did, her voice was quiet. "You gave up your calling for your son." "I didn't see it that way," he said. "I saw it as doing what a father should." Fallon looked at him, her heart aching in a way she hadn't expected. "You're not the man I thought I'd fall for." He raised an eyebrow. "What kind of man did you think?" "Someone polished. Someone who knew the difference between Bordeaux and Burgundy. Who lives in a penthouse and plays squash with senators." Landon chuckled. "I don't own a suit. And squash sounds like something I'd eat by accident." She laughed, then grew serious. "And yet here I am. Falling anyway." He set his plate down, his gaze steady. "You're not the woman I thought I'd fall for either." She swallowed. "Who did you picture?" "Someone who wouldn't vanish when things got complicated." She flinched. "You think I would?" "I don't know," he said. "But complication is coming. We're from different worlds, Fallon. And eventually, someone's going to make you choose." "I already did," she said, her voice sharp. "I chose to change the development plan. I chose to stand up to my board. I chose to come here tonight in the rain, with soggy pizza." Landon didn't back down. "That's not what I mean. I mean when your father calls and says this relationship is a liability. Or when your investors threaten to pull out unless you course correct. What happens then?" Fallon stood, restless. "I'm not my father, and I'm not my investors. But you answer to them," he said. "And I don't want to be the reason you lose something you've built your whole life." She turned to face him. "You're not. You're the reason I'm finally building something that matters." He stood too, crossing to her. "Then tell me, what does this look like in 6 months? In a year? When the press finds out? When your world collides with mine in ways we can't control?" She met his eyes, defiant. "Then we control what we can." We decide how this story goes." His jaw worked, but he didn't speak. She reached up, resting her hand on his chest. "You think I don't know how hard this will be? I do. But I also know what it's like to wake up in a high-rise bed with nothing but silence. I know what it's like to win and feel absolutely empty. You and Wyatt. You're the first thing in years that doesn't feel hollow." He exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing.
I'm scared, Fallon.
"So am I," she whispered. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Landon pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. She buried her face in his shoulder, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. The rain softened outside. Later that week, Fallon stood before a packed press room in a navy pantsuit, cameras flashing, reporters shouting. Behind her was a massive rendering of the updated East Side Project community-led renovations, subsidized housing guarantees, a new youth center funded by Whitmore Holdings. She cleared her throat. This isn't just about development. It's about preservation, about respect, about recognizing the people who call these streets home and giving them the tools to thrive instead of pushing them out. A few hands shot up, but one reporter's question cut through the others. "Ms. Whitmore, is it true you've recently become romantically involved with someone from the affected neighborhood?" Fallon didn't blink. "Yes."
Gasps.
More flashes. Murmurs. "Do you think that compromises your decisions here?" She looked directly into the camera.
No.
"It strengthens them. Because he reminded me of the cost of forgetting who we serve." Landon watched the live stream from the back room of the community center, Wyatt beside him, drawing spaceships. The sound cut in and out, but Fallon's voice came through clear. He felt something shift in him, something quiet and powerful, like the first seconds before a match catches flame. She hadn't run. She'd stood on the most public stage of her life and told the world the truth.
Not just about him.
About herself. Fallon stood in front of Landon's bathroom mirror, brushing a strand of mascara from beneath her eye with the tip of her finger. The mirror was slightly spotted, the sink chipped at the corner, and the cabinet door never closed quite right. And yet somehow, this space felt more like home than her entire penthouse ever had. Wyatt's voice rang from the other room, followed by the muffled sound of Landon chuckling. Fallon smiled to herself. Tonight was different. Not because of anything dramatic or grand, but because it was the first night she wasn't looking at her watch, calculating time zones, or wondering what meeting she was missing. She stepped out into the hallway, barefoot and relaxed, as the smell of lemon tea drifted from the kitchen. Landon was seated on the floor with Wyatt, carefully assembling the last piece of a cardboard castle. Wyatt's eyes lit up as he added a flag to the top, a crooked straw taped to a gum wrapper. "Perfect," Landon said, leaning back on his hands. "The royal fortress is complete." Wyatt beamed. "Can it stay here forever?" Landon glanced up at Fallon. "We'll make room." She leaned against the doorway, watching them. "It deserves a place of honor." Wyatt stood and ran to her. "You're the queen. Dad says so." She knelt to his level. "And you're the prince?" He nodded. "Dad's the knight." Landon raised his eyebrows. "I thought I was the cook." "You're everything," Wyatt said simply. Fallon's throat tightened as she pulled the boy into a hug. "You're going to be the best kind of king one day." After Wyatt was asleep, tucked beneath his spaceship blanket, Landon joined Fallon on the fire escape. A quiet breeze swept between the buildings, carrying the scent of warm asphalt and distant rain. "He's happier lately," she said, resting her head against Landon's shoulder. "He's always been a happy kid," Landon said. "But yeah, he's softer now. Lighter." She looked up at him. "Because of me? Because we're not alone anymore." They sat in silence for a while. The city hummed below them, 1,000 lights blinking in rhythm. Fallon reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. She handed it to him. "What's this?" Something I've been working on. Quietly, Landon opened it and scanned the document. His brow furrowed. This is a proposal for a community development trust. Funded by Whitmore Holdings, she said. With independent oversight. Grants for small businesses. Scholarships. Infrastructure upgrades decided by residents. He looked up. This isn't about us, is it? It's about doing the right thing, she said. But I won't pretend you didn't inspire it. He set the paper down. You're changing everything. I'm changing what I should have seen years ago. He turned to her, his voice soft. You're not afraid anymore. I'm still afraid, she admitted. But I'm not running from that fear. I'm building with it. Landon's hand slid into hers. Then let's build something real. The following week, Fallon invited him to the gala. He didn't want to go at first. But when she showed him the invitation, a formal benefit to announce the new trust, he realized it wasn't about tuxedos and champagne. It was about standing beside her when the world saw who she really was now. Grace helped him find a suit that fit. Fallon paid, but not with fanfare. She simply left the receipt folded in the breast pocket with a handwritten note. No one else I'd rather walk in with. The night of the gala, the venue sparkled with glass chandeliers and candlelight. The Whitmore crest gleamed across a massive screen as guests filtered in, sipping gold-rimmed flutes. Fallon arrived last, her hand resting on Landon's arm as whispers rippled through the room. That's her? With him. He's not even, she looks happy. Fallon didn't flinch. She walked in like she owned the building because she did, but tonight, she wore that power differently. Not like armor, like truth. Landon leaned toward her. Are you sure about this? She glanced at him, eyes shining. I've never been sure of anything. When she took the stage, the room quieted. This company has always been about growth, she said. But tonight, we redefine what that means. Not in square footage. Not in profit margins. But in people, in lives changed, in communities strengthened without being erased. We're not just building buildings, we're building belonging. Landon watched from the crowd, his hands clasped behind his back. Grace stood beside him, her expression unreadable. You know, she said quietly, I didn't get it at first. Why she kept chasing after you. He glanced at her. And now? Grace smiled. Now I see it. After Fallon stepped down, applause erupted, more genuine than any she'd received before. But she didn't scan the room for investors or cameras. She looked for Landon. He was already walking toward her. They met at the center of the ballroom, beneath a cascade of soft light.
He didn't ask.
He just took her hand and pulled her into a slow, certain dance. You're trembling, he whispered. Am I? She asked, breath-catching. A little. I guess that's what happens when you fall for someone who puts you back together. He kissed her, right there in front of everyone, and no one dared interrupt. Weeks later, she quietly moved into a modest brownstone only a few blocks from Landon's. Not because she couldn't afford more, but because she wanted less. Less distance. Less pretending. Less walls between her and the life she'd finally chosen. Wyatt helped her unpack. He insisted her office shelves be filled with both books and toys. Landon built her a desk by hand. And one Sunday morning, as light streamed through the kitchen windows and the smell of pancakes filled the air, Fallon looked around and realized she wasn't falling anymore. She had landed, right where she was always meant to be. The first time Fallon let herself breathe in weeks was on a quiet Wednesday evening, tucked into a corner booth at the back of a jazz lounge she didn't know existed until Landon brought her there. It wasn't flashy. It didn't have a name on the door or a velvet rope. But the music curled through the air like smoke, and the lights were warm and low, and it felt like a pocket of the world where no one knew her title. Landon slid a glass of honey whiskey across the table. You've been holding your breath since the gala. She took it and rested her fingers around the cool glass. I didn't realize it showed. It always does, he said. You only drink whiskey when you're trying to ground yourself. Her eyebrows rose. Since when do you know my drink habits? He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Since I started watching the way you tuck your thumb under the rim when you're nervous. She stared at him. That's not possible. You also tap your heel when you're holding something in, and you switch your earrings when you're angry. Fallon laughed, startled by how exposed and cared for she felt in the same breath. You're dangerous. I'm observant, he said, and invested.
She softened.
Then let me invest back. He tilted his head. What do you mean? I've been working on something, she said. Not for the company. For you. For Wyatt. For us. You already gave us more than I could have imagined.
No.
I gave my name, my influence, but I haven't offered you stability. Not really. He sat back. Fallon, you don't owe me anything. I know, she said, but I want to give you something anyway. He waited. I bought the building, she said quietly. Landon blinked. What building? Yours. The apartment. The community center. The grocery next door. All of it. He stared at her, unmoving.
She pressed on.
I created a trust that hands legal ownership to the tenants.
You won't owe rent.
You won't lose it if something happens to me. The community keeps it forever. He shook his head slowly. That's not small, Fallon. I know it's not, she said. But I don't want to be a visitor in your world. I want to be part of it. You already are, he said, his voice low. You always were. They sat in silence while the music shifted into something slow and aching. Fallon reached for his hand. Come dance with me. He hesitated, then stood and pulled her gently into the open space near the stage. She fit against him easily now, like the edges had worn smooth between them. They swayed in time to the music, her cheek against his chest, his hand firm at her waist. After a while, he whispered, I've been thinking about something. She looked up. What is it? I want more, he said. Not just moments like this. All of it. The mess, the mornings, the hard days, the quiet ones. I want every piece of it. She felt her throat tighten. Are you asking? He nodded.
Yeah.
I am. Fallon blinked back tears. Then the answer is yes. They didn't need a ring or a spotlight. The promise was enough. Spoken between heartbeats and held in hands that had learned how to carry the weight of real love. Weeks later, on a bright spring afternoon, Fallon stood barefoot in a backyard garden behind a restored brownstone. Children chased bubbles across the grass. Wyatt wore a navy vest and held a tray of lemonade like a proud usher. Landon stood beneath an arch of wildflowers, adjusting his tie as he watched Fallon walk toward him in a simple ivory dress that caught the breeze like something alive. The guest list was small. Grace, dressed in soft green, gave a toast that made half the guests cry and Landon shake his head with a grin. The neighborhood baker made the cake. The florist down the street donated the flowers. It wasn't opulent. It wasn't meant to be. When Fallon reached him, Landon took her hands in his without hesitation. The vows were written in their own words. I never expected you, she said, but you're the only thing that's ever felt inevitable. He smiled. You taught me that love isn't about rescue. It's about choosing to stay. Every day. When the ceremony ended, the music began again, and Fallon danced in the grass with Wyatt on her feet while Landon watched, arms crossed, eyes soft. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the string lights swayed quietly overhead, Landon carried her up the stairs of their brownstone. She laughed as he bumped her shoulder against the doorframe, and he kissed her until the laughter melted into something slower, sweeter. Inside, the house was already theirs. Pictures lined the mantel. Wyatt's drawings were magnet to the fridge. The scent of vanilla and fresh paint lingered in the corners. It wasn't a palace, but it was full. Full of stories. Full of love. full of everything she'd once thought she had to trade away to succeed. Fallon curled into Landon's chest as they lay in bed, the windows open to the soft hum of the city. "I used to think falling was the worst thing that could happen," she whispered. "And now I know," she said, tracing her fingers along his skin. "It's how I found everything I didn't know I needed." Landon pressed a kiss to her temple. "Then let's keep falling. Together." And they did. Together, they built a life that wasn't about headlines or legacies or boardrooms. It was about pancakes on Sunday, sidewalk chalk in the driveway, and stolen kisses in the kitchen. It was messy and beautiful, and deeply theirs. And it was forever.